this was interesting. So Mike Tyson, when was on his Hot Boxing podcast this week, he was with Canelo Alvarez, Eddie Reynoso, and Henry Cejudo. I haven't watched the whole thing, but I did see the clip of this. And he was asked about where his next fight was going to be. And Tyson said that it's going to be at the end of May, like May 29th, May 30th. So I imagine the last Saturday in May, Memorial Day weekend. And he said it's going to be at Hard Rock Stadium, that it's going to be at the place where Canelo fought. That's what the way he said, the place you fought, Yildirim. Which a couple things. One, that's awesome that we're gonna have Mike Tyson down here. It sounds like, which makes sense. Look, a lot of people are coming down here to Florida. You guys are seeing how wild spring break is. You want to talk about, some fight games and all you're seeing down there. It's crazy. But a lot of people are coming down here because we are, the most open. We're most willy-nilly with the COVID rules. We're opening first, all that type of stuff. And not all these shows, like it was announced, we talked about the Andrade fight last week. That is going to be behind closed doors. So not all of them are still completely opening up yet. I've been to Heat games, and they're still not all the way back. The Heat are doing, 3,000 fans. I think the Panthers are up to like 5,000. I think I've seen attendance numbers in that. So the Panthers are even a little bit more, they're opening it up a little bit more. They're being a little bit more loose with it, all that type of stuff. So it makes sense that somebody like Mike Tyson, now that you go from, the behind closed doors, and that was supposed to be against Roy Jones with fans, and it was a big thing in the negotiations, to put it in a place where there are going to be fans. There's no word on an opponent yet. The Holyfield thing is still getting kicked around. I guess that's one of the rumors. I wouldn't even be surprised if they go back in the direction of Roy Jones. But one of the things that I found interesting about this is when I first saw this news, the timeline and the dates were a little bit interesting because Triller is putting together the George Cambosa Teofimo Lopez lightweight championship fight. And that's also been in that same range where they've talked about May 29th, June 5th has been the timetable they're talking about. And they are targeting Teofimo Lopez and George Cambosa to be down here. So there's a couple things that are interesting about that. One, if Tyson is going to fight down here and going to have a boxing match down here, will that, scare them off from doing Teofimo Lopez versus George Cambosa, even though it's a more legit boxing match? Or do they think that Tyson is more the freak show? They have more of the actual boxing match. That's one thing that's an interesting development. I don't know. And the other thing is, when I first saw the news, I was like, oh, then it's going to be a co-feature. It's going to be something it's going to be George Cambosa and Mike Tyson. They're going to be on the same card. But I read in Boxing Scene, this comes from Boxing Scene, it says, let me get the deets. So Ryan Kavanaugh, who is the owner of Triller, he had previously told Boxing Scene that Tyson, if he chooses to do future exhibitions with his Legends Only League, Triller has the first and last right of refusal to obtain the rights to the show. So I guess they did like a 2-fight deal the last time they did the last time that he did the Roy Jones fight. Kavanaugh had also previously said that Teofimo Lopez versus George Cambosa Triller Fight Club pay-per-view will be on a separate show and not staged at the same card potential as Mike Tyson or a potential Mike Tyson Holyfield fight. That's also interesting because, that's a lot of money that they're putting into one card. I don't know if that economically pans out for them. I don't know how much they have to pay Mike Tyson. I don't know. And we know that they're paying Cambosa and they're paying, especially Teofimo, a lot of money to do this fight. And they are trying to kind of legitimately get into the boxing game too, with a sideshow of gimmick. And they would obviously want to have this fight locked up because you have the Jake Paul fight that's coming up in about a month's time. And that's going to have a lot of, backing behind. Antonio Tarver is going to be fighting on that card. So there's other stuff with that as well. But One of the things that was interesting about this was that on March 4th, Teofimo had deleted a tweet announcing that his fight was going to take place June 5th in Miami. We talked a little bit about this last week, where we said that Teofimo and Cambosa seemed like it was going to be aimed towards South Florida, which makes a lot of sense. Cambosa trains down here, even though he is from Australia. He does train out here in Davie at Javier Centano's sweatbox gym. And Teofimo Lopez has basically birthed his boxing career down here with a lot of the stuff that he did as a younger fighter. So it makes sense to have the fight down here, but it seems like they're both kind of eyeing the same weekend area, and it's a couple things. One, does Triller, are they going? They made a big deal and made a big, in a weird way, they've made a big investment into Lopez Cambosa, which seems silly when you think about, you have a Mike Tyson fight. But they do seemingly want to get in the legit boxing game, and they kind of shook it all up with the big purse bid they made. So they have a lot invested into this fight. It's important to them. But the interesting thing is then, so when does the Tyson fight happen? The other thing could be maybe they're not even worried. Tyson's just saying stuff, and maybe Tyson will kick it down the road to July. Maybe I would just think that they're gonna. I don't think there's anything wrong. Like, if anything, it's a very similar model to the UFC. They would almost set themselves up if they could do Jake Paul fighting in April, either Mike Tyson or Cambosis Lopez in May, end of May, and it wouldn't cross over too much with Canelo, who would be fighting earlier in the month. And then you would say sometime in the summer you do whichever one loses out, then you do that one. It would be a hell of a trio for Triller. And that's a tongue twister. But we don't know yet if Triller is even going to be in the Mike Tyson game. We don't know that. I would think that they would want to be, because that's kind of how everybody learned about them. Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, all of that stuff. That's kind of how it was their coming out party. So I would think that they would want to keep it going, and that they would want to keep Mike Tyson in the fold. But, Mike Tyson's also the big dog there. So if he wants to fight on a certain weekend and that's going to mess up their other plans, then Mike Tyson's going to fight when he wants to fight. It was an interesting thing that got released this week. But look, all that's for them to worry about. The real good part of it for us is Mike Tyson says he's fighting in Miami. It looks very much like we're going to get Teofimo Lopez and George Cambosis in South Florida. I don't know if it's going to be, in Miami. I don't know if it's going to be, BB&T. Who knows? But it looks like it's going to be somewhere in South Florida, which is awesome. And sets up for a really, really great time. So there was that this week as far as the boxing world was concerned, and especially, the exhibition realm. But this Triller's shaking it up, man. Whether they're in the Tyson thing or not, they definitely have their hand in the cookie jar in a lot of stories. And then if they were to get Mike Tyson, that sets them up for, three of the biggest fights, or three of the fights that's going to garner the most eyeballs over this spring summer season. Because you got, we obviously Canelo and Billy Joe Saunders is going to be a big deal. Combat sports wise, UFC's got the Masvidal fight, which we'll get to. The Masvidal Usman's coming back up, the rematch, which will do big numbers, I think. And then they'll have the Conor McGregor Dustin Poirier trilogy probably in July, if I had to guess. And those are definitely big ones. And then of course we have Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua. So the year's setting up to have some really, really big bouts, but they still lay claim to some of the ones that are going to have the most public interest for sure. They definitely do.